All right, I'm going to start the broadcast here in a minute. Derek, I'll send you a chat message when we're good to go.
Very well. Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome back for another CEFMA Virtual Vegas session. Today's topic, pivoting, adjusting how a facility is managed. My name is Derek Doolittle, and I serve as the Associate Athletic Director for Facilities, Operations, and Capital Projects at UCLA, in addition to serving as a Board of Directors member for CEFMA. Before we get started, and as we head to the close of Virtual Vegas tomorrow, I'd like to extend an incredible debt of gratitude to the individuals who have worked tirelessly to orchestrate these tremendous opportunities for the membership of the CEFMA community and beyond. To Katie Egloff, Katie Newman, Precious Birdsong, and so many others, kudos for a tremendous stretch of programming for the CEFMA community. As we get started, a few general housekeeping items for all of us. First of all participants' lines are muted and your video is disabled. To ask a question during the course of the presentation, attendees may type their question in the Q&A feature on the Zoom platform. As the moderator, I will review and funnel as time allows to our panelists. Lastly, this session will be recorded and archived in the CEFMA member community for your future reference. Pivoting, that's what we're all doing 24/7 right now. And boy, do we have a tremendous group of panelists today to talk specifically to the facility side of the world and how we're pivoting in this new time. I'm joined today by experts from around the country, including Gavin Goff from the University of Utah, Jason Mladenowski from Carnegie Mellon University, and Bob Weissman from Duke. Gentlemen, such a pleasure to be here with you this morning or afternoon, wherever you may be. And if you guys don't mind introducing yourself, we'll start with Gavin.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Appreciate that introduction. I don't know if we call ourselves experts, but we're all in this together, and it's a privilege to be here with you all. So yes, my name is Gavin Goff. I'm the Assistant AD for Facilities and Capital Projects here at the University of Utah. And much like my title suggests, that's what I oversee, all facility management, maintenance, and then I had the privilege to also oversee capital projects for our department. So again, thanks for the opportunity.
Excellent. Jason.
Yeah, definitely not an expert. Jason Mladenowski, Associate Director of Athletics for Facilities, Events, and Operations, Division III Carnegie Mellon. In addition to the facilities and events side, I also have oversight of the equipment management, sports information and marketing. I'm a SAC liaison. I have some sport oversight and also serve a role on advancements. So typical Division III, very many hats.
That's a lot of hats, Jason. You must have a big rack. Bob?
Thanks, Derek. Bob Wiseman, Senior Associate Athletic Director here at Duke University. Have 11 staff under our realm, overseeing athletic facilities, game day operations, and championships. We manage about 29 facilities with 27 sport programs, run about 350 events annually. And my main focus is really obviously on the facility side, besides managing our department, on construction, maintenance, upkeep, et cetera, throughout our 29 facilities. Appreciate being here today, Derek.
Thanks, Bob. And again, thanks to all of you. I know our time is incredibly valuable right now, especially as we work feverishly to prepare for our student athletes to return to campus, et cetera. I think this is an important topic today. You know, as we begin the conversation, I think it's really critical to understand from each of you, what are your general philosophies in terms of facility management, and what are the guidelines that really drive your decision making on a daily basis? Gavin, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Generally my philosophies are centered around having facilities that are always game day, recruit, and donor ready. So that's sort of the focus of our team, is just making sure that, so we don't have to prepare every time we have one of those events, or we have a game coming up, or we have a recruiting visit. So that we're always ready. And so we want to treat the facilities that way. So they feel game day ready, they feel recruit ready, 365. So in order to achieve that goal, we do put a lot of focus on, the basics, and we're going to probably talk a lot about these today, but, communication, sound resource allocation, and relationship building. So, whether it's the mundane day-to-day facility maintenance stuff that we all do, that we love so much, or leading a project that enhances the game day experience or the student athlete experience. Either way, our goal is to make sure that here at Utah, to make sure that Utah is on the elite level nationally when it comes to facilities. So to think about the arms race and what COVID-19 is doing to the arms race is a whole different topic. But speaking of the arms race, you never really can catch up, right? But and there's some facilities where we are right in line with some of the best, but there are others that aren't. And so I think it's our job to make sure that those facilities that aren't sort of look at least presentable. I'm here in a 50-year-old building, like making sure that this 50-year-old building doesn't look like it's 50 years old. So our philosophy is just making sure that we have those values and those procedures, that focus on, like I said, communication and relationship building. It's also very important, that we have a good basis, right? So we have O&M policies, we have maintenance plans, we have, policies and procedures, like all that stuff that ultimately just makes our job easier. So I know it's not the pretty stuff that we like doing, but it's the stuff that really helps us have the tools in order to, work more efficiently and be ahead of the game.
Outstanding. Thanks, Gavin. Jason?
Yeah, a little different from my perspective. At Division III Carnegie Mellon, I'm very fortunate to be here, but to be, I guess, proficient at my job, there really has to be a focus on thoughtful planning and really prioritizing what's essential. We work off of a zero-based budgeting approach here. So there's roughly $30,000 for annual maintenance, which means one thing. We have a very limited capability of dealing with surprises. So we really need to be thoughtful on how we handle the day-to-day, like the more mundane tasks. Doing the preventative maintenance, sanding coats of gym floors, bleacher inspections, field grooms, facility walkthroughs, all those checklists need to be checked. Those boxes need to be checked in order to kind of have an evaluation of what the current state of our facilities are and really project future capabilities and what kind of capital projects we can really dream up with our donor base. Secondly, collaboration with campus partners at this level is key, right? We don't have a facilities and custodial department that's housed specifically for athletics. It's under general campus. Sure. And especially during this time of COVID-19 and addressing these issues that are coming up, healthy, collaborative communication with these campus partners is absolutely key to being ready for the fall. I have to be a phone call away when things happen. And finally, just simplifying procedures and coming up with efficient procedures. As I kind of alluded to earlier, I wear a number of hats and I don't necessarily have the time on a daily basis to delve into a lot of the nuts and bolts of facility management. So when I do spend my 90 minutes or 2 hours or 3 hours, whatever it is, it has to be useful. And, I like things tight. I like my checklist. There's efficient ways to convey what's broken and what's not, and what needs to be repaired, and how to follow up on those items. Those steps need to be taken in order to wear this hat appropriately.
Outstanding. Thanks, Jason. Bob, how about you?
Thanks, Derek. Yeah, our focus here at Duke is really on people. And for us, it's about investing in our staff working in athletic facilities. And a lot of times people say you got 11 staff, you should be able to cover everything and do everything. But when you start to expand that out to look at 29 facilities, 27 sport programs, and the number of events kind of under our watch, it's hard to keep up. And so training our people first and investing our people first is incredibly important. And so we really preach within that realm to be present. You really can't know what's going on in your facility or know how it operates, or even in the current pandemic, respond to it if you don't know about your facility, if you don't know how it functions, if you don't know the users, et cetera. And then expanding upon that, it's the little things that matter, the details, and really an emphasis on making sure those little things are covered up front, so that the bigger things don't arise throughout this process. And that's a lot of our focus currently has been living that mantra every day, and getting someone in our spaces and checking them. And it seems mundane and routine and probably excessive to some point, but you're finding stuff that matters. And with that is communication throughout the process, whether that's to the users, whether that's to our staff, whether that's to our contractors, vendors, et cetera. Investing in them to let them know what we are feeling, what our expectations, what's going on, how things are adjusting, et cetera. And then finally, kind of being true to us. So when we talk about expectations, and Gavin talked a little bit about the arms race, we preach a lot, and our athletic director, Kevin White, preaches a lot about being a little bit of a boutique institution and building to do, and being present in kind of how we approach things, how we operate, not trying to build 100,000 seat stadium or to expand on Cameron, et cetera. And so we really try to focus on that across the board in design. You and I were talking earlier about our plan that we put forth for return for COVID-19. And all those things are very unique to our campus culture, to the way we operate in athletics, and the culture really moving forward. And that's being honest about who we are and how we operate.
Outstanding. Thanks, Bob. And thank you each for really helping set the stage in terms of what it looks like when you're considering operations of your facilities on a day-to-day basis. I'll just remind the audience that if at any time you have a question for the group, please feel free to insert it into the question and answer box. And I'll actually take those real time as I can. If we're talking about something relevant, I'll bring up your question immediately. Otherwise, I'll save them for the end. Gavin, it's funny when you talk about being recruit ready and ready for your donors and just the overall presentation of your facility. It's interesting because did you have a pandemic ready plan? If you did, good for you, because I sure didn't. And talk a little bit about the first several days and weeks of COVID-19 and what steps were taken at Utah to safeguard your facilities at the very beginning, and then what steps were taken to transition into a period of perhaps relative dormancy?
Yeah, we didn't have a plan, Derek. I'm sure you did, but no, like everything.
That was just me.
Yeah, everything we did was really on the fly. I don't think any of us thought that this could happen, right? Like it wasn't on anyone's radar. So there was no way to plan for it, but we didn't have a plan in place, and going forward, we will have a plan, for something like this. It was, out of the gate, what are we, week 11 of quarantine. So, 12 weeks ago, whatever that was, we were just flying by the seat of our pants, honestly. Like it was the first thing that was hard for us to grasp was, a lot of our facilities are open 365 for the most part, right? Like we've got people in them every day, all day. And so to sort of think about, it wasn't like Las Vegas. I don't know if you've seen the thing about Las Vegas casinos didn't have locks on the door. So it wasn't to that extent, but just getting our brains around the fact that, these facilities would be empty. So the step one was to secure our campus and to, keep things locked down as much as possible, like card readers and whatnot. But, we even went to the extent of, I had to go to Home Depot and buy chain and padlocks. Like there's some of our facilities we had to actually lock down because we didn't have any other way to do it. So that was our first step, is just locking it down. And then we fortunately here at Utah, in the state of Utah, ours was a directive, not an order, so a stay at home directive. So we had a little bit of flexibility. It wasn't just like, hey, Derek, you got to go home and have a nice day. But we had a few weeks to sort of work out some of the kinks. And at the time, if I think back, we actually thought that there was a possibility that students would be coming back to campus. Right, that just goes to show how little we knew of the situation we were in. We were on spring break, and so a lot of our student athletes were gone at home or on vacation. So we were making plans to try to bring them back. So we were sort of doing a lot of what we're doing now, 11 weeks later. And hey, how can we do this in 1 week to get them here? So that was definitely a stressful time. But we had some time to get some more clarity from the conference and the university, and realize that we were definitely shutting down. But we did keep a few facilities open, for those student athletes that had, rehab from surgeries or whatnot. But yeah, we basically took 2 weeks and systematically decided, which facilities would remain open and which ones would remain closed, and we closed them and shut down systems, so HVAC and electrical, we completely shut those facilities down. We created a white list so that very few people could get in the building. So even if our staff or coaches wanted to get in, they couldn't. And if you did, the building was actually shut down. And we were fortunate because of the time of year with the climate, right? So we weren't really worried about, freezing or getting too hot or anything like that. So we really just kind of locked them, shut things down, and walked away. Well, I shouldn't say we walked away completely. We were fortunate to have at least one facility staff member through this whole process be on site every single day. And so that person's been our go-to and doing facility walkthroughs and kind of checking things out, much like Bob referred to. So yeah, I've heard of a few of my colleagues across country that have had issues with vandalism and theft, and we have been fortunate we haven't had that. Like, they've actually spent most of their time kicking people off athletic fields, people from jumping the fences and playing. But so yeah, that's kind of the process that we went through.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Vandalism has certainly been prevalent. I know I've talked to a lot of colleagues around the country who talked about how they're wearing out door handle releases and door openers and closures. So I've actually heard from a lot there saying they just took them off their doors. So that's really interesting. And I think that you explained it interestingly as well, in terms of we didn't know what we were going into, right? Was this an extended spring break? I know I was listening to a podcast with Buzz Williams this weekend, and he said that exact same thing. What do we tell our guys? We don't necessarily know what we're rolling into here. We actually have a few questions, and the first question is going to transition us well to our next topic. So Bob, I'm going to ask you this question first, and I'll get to an audience question. But one of the cornerstones of your facility management is communication. And I think we would all agree that the best laid plans can fall flat with a failure to communicate. So what have your communication been between you and your administration and you and your building users? And how about your staff as well?
That's a great question, and something we talk about a lot here. I would far from say it's likely the right model or even an effective model sometimes, is communication is obviously constantly evolving and difficult. But we've talked about transparency and being truth tellers about kind of what we're doing and how we're approaching things. And we had a little bit of heads up that this was coming, not a ton. And our emergency management team and having a campus over in China, we had a little bit of warning, but to say we were prepared would be an understatement. But we had some knowledge, and myself and Becca Willis on our staff sit on our emergency management team. So we were able to get that information, really engage with our executive staff, and start to think about things. And for us, our biggest event of the year, the Duke Carolina basketball team game, was the Saturday before things shut down. And so, there was a lot of discussions of would that game continue, et cetera. And then if it did, how would we prepare? And so a lot of the ramp up in those discussions were kind of behind closed doors, and we integrated and we moved on thinking things would continue. And then our exec team started to have to transition and pivot, just like Gavin mentioned and everyone's mentioned through this process, to prepare for what the new world looked like. And so we talked about transparency top to bottom, and that was hugely important for us. And the understanding that we might be managing these facilities, but other people live in them, and we're impacting their lives and how they operate, and something that they've probably done in our world 365. I mean, people not coming to campus, whether it be coaches, student athletes, et cetera, and trying to really get the word out of what the expectation of what was happening, et cetera, how they could help us, how we could help them. Communicating needs. What are your needs in terms of remote operations, et cetera? How can we help you in terms of getting restricted access, so on and so forth. So we really focused on that relationship and, kind of supporting the people who live in these buildings, having open two-way communication. From our staff, I remember gathering my staff. I think it was Thursday. I was supposed to go down to our first ACC tournament game. We found it was canceled. And I told them, I'm going to tell you the truth all the way through this. Here's what we're going to do at step A, B, and C. And what I likely told you will change in an hour. And I'm going to keep updating you throughout this process. So, and we've kind of taken that philosophy across the board and communicating with our head coaches, our department heads, our executive staff and campus, and really being in communication with campus too as kind of a stakeholder and obviously maintenance and upkeep of our facilities, and letting them know that we're in alignment, that we're in support, and that we're going to continue to move forward. And we felt that the more the user knew, the more campus knew, the better off we were going to be moving forward.
Yeah, no question. I totally agree with you, Bob. Transparency is so important, and how challenging has it been? Just with the fluidity of information, it's just been incredible trying to keep up and keep communicating in an ever-changing landscape. I think, Bob, to funnel into what you just said, we had a specific audience question regarding specifically student athletes and how we've communicated with them, and anybody can really chime in. But has it been an assortment of teamwork communications directly from administration? Have the coaches handled communications? Because, as you can imagine, these are individuals that what they do, aside from their studies, is compete and build themselves physically. So it's been a challenging time for them.
Yeah, the one thing I'll throw out there is the way we function, and we talked about being true to ourselves. We're very unique in that, to a bit siloed. So sport programs and departments, we acknowledge constantly that we're unique and we operate in different manners. And so as we talk about our planning and our communication, it's not one size fits all. We need to be specific to that. So we've really focused our direction, our communication on those people within our community that are leaders. So department heads, head coaches, and the ability for them to customize that communication to their specific needs and those people underneath them and the questions they have, and then funnel that information and communication back up. And that's been the primary focus for us in communicating with student athletes through their sport programs. We have in our planning process engaged with our SAC committee. That is something we actually undertook, and a bunch of our former student athletes in what we call our validation phase of our guideline creation for resumption. So that was also another step. And we produced a survey just asking their concerns and confidence in returning.
It's outstanding. It's very well done by you and your team at Duke. I will pivot here and stay in the communication world, but pivot slightly, and let's talk a little bit about collaboration. And Jason, I know you talked a little bit about collaboration at the top and kind of one of your cornerstones, but how have you used your collaborative relationships, and how have they assisted you as you've navigated your facilities and teams through COVID-19?
Yeah, Derek. So as we all know, there is a wealth of information on COVID-19, and it's constantly changing. As Bob, you alluded to, what happened one day is not necessarily what's true the next day. So that collaboration with campus partners and kind of filtering through all that information is key to understanding what's going on. And I'm fortunate to be part of a university that is really good at collaborating. We're not necessarily siloed. We have a great relationship with our facilities and custodians. And we were able to navigate those first days relatively well into building closures and what work orders are going to look like and what repairs are actually going to be able to accomplish and when. There was a lot of confusion on who is going to be on campus. As I remember keep on thinking like, well, I can't believe we've gotten this far. So it got to a point where, well, this is going to keep going until like we're done. So this is the new normal for the time being. As we've evolved from that transition phase of closing the facilities and into this almost a summer mode where we're off campus, we've begun, like many schools have, a return to play committee, and it started off very small collaboration between athletic administrators and health services, and we just kind of did this general what does it look like, what would return to play look like over the summer, what do we really have to be concerned with. As that information grew, it became unattainable for a group of 5 or 6 individuals to really dig down into and get the answers without expertise of others. So that's grown. There's members from student affairs, from facilities, from health services, Title IX office, the Office of General Counsel will eventually be mixed in there as well, to go with others as we kind of discuss what does it look like, because that's our priority, getting back to the fall. It's what we do. Too many voices too soon could create a a blockage of information, honestly. But we're at that point where we need some perspective to kind of regulate all the federal and state and local regulations that are coming down upon us. So, I mean, I had concerns about proper signage from a facilities perspective, how often our facilities were going to be cleaned and sanitized, what that plan was for just returning students in general. And our partners in the facilities department have been fantastic in communicating that and what they're gearing up for. As you know, we're somewhat of a limited budget, I touched on before, and we can't do this without their buy-in and understanding of what athletics means to the university. Which I'm sure we're all kind of in that boat of it's going to take more than the athletic department to get this done, especially with all the conflicting information. So, yeah.
No question, Jason. I think that was very well laid out. And I think, you hit home that using your campuses as a resource, and whether you're Carnegie Mellon or UCLA or Duke or Utah, I mean, the reality is we're a part of a big ship that has a lot of resources. So using those resources to your advantage, and I think something the CEFMA community has done a tremendous job of over the past several weeks too, is using each other as an advantage. I know Gavin and I bounce things back and forth. Bob and I, Jason and I, we're all on the same boat. We're all working towards the same objective on the field. We might want to beat each other, but right now we're all in this together, and we want college athletics to return in a big way. So thanks for addressing that, Jason. Gavin, you talked a lot about maintenance plans and operation and management maintenance manuals and just developing systems to succeed. I want to dig in a little bit here for a couple of reasons. First, I want to understand in the COVID-19 world how you've had to pivot a little bit. And two, you and I have talked before about how providing these maintenance plans and operation manuals and overseeing them is a form of customer service. And I love that. But talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Derek. I did touch on that a little bit earlier about, it's the stuff that we hate doing, right? As facility managers that really sets us apart, right? It helps us do our job, makes our job easier, right? So, those policies and those procedures, they're not only there to help with future planning and, budget forecasting, stuff that our CFO likes, but it's really good because it just lays out a clear picture for the users of the building, right? Specifically, we like to talk mostly about the coaches because they're the ones that are the pain in our necks and calling us the most often. But I think it just helps set the stage for what resources we have and what we can do. So it puts us in a hard spot sometimes when we most of our budgets are fixed or the monies that we have available are through a budget, and so you can't just go off and do this or that. But there are some monies, at least here at Utah and probably UCLA and Duke as well, where there is some discretionary monies here and there. And what I like to get away from is playing favorites, right? Because if you do that, it can get out of hand and other coaches notice. And I think a better approach is to have these plans in place and then to sit down with them and say, hey, this is what we have available. This is what we can do for you in your facility to enhance the recruiting experience when you have visits, or to make it better for your practice, your game, or whatever it might be. So, these maintenance plans and the O&M, like those aren't documents that we want to share with them by any means. But I think, having that relationship, of course, is important. But setting, what I like to do is just doing these one-page executive summaries of, okay, this is what we have available to you this year, and this is what we can do. So at the end of the day, when it comes to customer, customer support, the customer is always right, and I always try to remember that. So we only have limited resources, so we just need to do our best to educate them on that. And it's been valuable to me to go through that process with different coaches, and it opens their eyes to what we can and cannot do. And we're really all going to have to face this year with limited budget. We're all going to be restricted on what we can and cannot do. So that communication and laying out the plan is very, very important.
Yeah, no question, Gavin. And I appreciate you outlining that and talking about resource allocation and budgeting. As many can imagine, we're getting a number of questions in the Q&A panel regarding just that and budgeting. And Gavin, you're talking about, efficiency of resources. Jason, you're talking about already zero-based budgeting and a relatively modest annual maintenance budget. What are we talking about budget-wise? Because the reality is we're facing a challenge where revenues might not be that high either. So Bob at Duke, from a budgeting standpoint, how are you guys moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's probably the single topic we spend the most time on right now. And kind of, one thing we talked about was we have to find a way to mitigate that revenue loss across the enterprise, and everybody bought into that early, which is good, and that's part of our communication process. But for us within facilities specifically, the plan we brought to the table was, as we look at lowering risk for our most important asset, our student athletes, which is how do we do that? And one of the ways to do that is to continue to push for remote work if available. So we had surveyed our employees just last week, and 95% of those who responded, which is about 70%, had said they were fine continuing to work remotely and be efficient and productive. And so we've kind of transitioned that thought process into let's continue down that road, because it'll lessen our spend on utilities, it'll lessen our maintenance, it'll lessen kind of the building reactivation in terms of HVAC, plumbing, et cetera. And can we bang out $1 million, $1.5 million by redirecting and reallocating those resources? Because we know we're likely going to need them from the standpoint of supporting our student athletes. So can we look at how we can use at least the short term to our advantage to correct things? And then obviously we dive down into every other little detail within sport programs and departments and how we operate. And from our side, on the game operations side and the facility side, our staff was tasked with going to find what they can find. And in the past, that's historically been a 5% budget cut or a 10% budget cut. But in this current time, it's go find what you can find. Let's be realistic. Let's operate, as closer to lean as we can get in this process. And that's been our focus.
Excellent. Jason, how about at the Division III level and talking about budgeting and moving forward through and beyond COVID-19? What does it look like?
Yeah, so we haven't set any restrictions necessarily on the future. Like there's no communication of 10% out of everybody's budget or the department budget. What we're really looking at for is defining what's essential in order to get back to play on this fall. And COVID-19 safety and regulations and getting everybody back appropriately is at the forefront. Otherwise, we're not going to be here at all. So with that in mind, that's a priority. And we've put some things on hold, some capital projects we're planning to do this summer. We're reevaluating what the annual maintenance looks like, and do these things need to be done now? Can they wait until next season? And that's limiting from a facilities perspective. As we move into the year, there'll be further discussions on what makes us competitive. What was some fluff that due to the economic atmosphere that we've had, we were able to add quite a bit in the last 10 years, right? Things have been pretty good for athletics. So this is a readjustment period, and definitely I'm looking at it as an opportunity to become more efficient, leaner, and not necessarily a challenging, oh man, what are we going to do? No, it's the priorities getting back to play. And we're doing a pretty good job right now getting to that point.
I think, I'm glad you said that, Jason. And the reality is levels of expectations are still going to be high, right? And that's who we are. We're going to put those high levels of expectations upon ourselves. But we're just going to have to be a little more resourceful in getting to those expectations. I spent some time at the Division III level myself during the youth of my career. And I've told my team earlier, hey, you know what? We're going to have to do things a lot more efficiently as we move forward. And, as Gavin would allude to, create these facilities are ready at any given minute's notice for a recruit or high level donor. But Jason, you mentioned capital projects. I'm going to shift to Gavin. Gavin, from a capital project standpoint, What differences are you seeing real time?
Yeah, so here at Utah, we pause almost all capital projects. I think the way Jason said it was nice, trying to decide what is essential and, just going forward into the next year, it didn't make sense using any operating money to fund some of these projects, right? Just because of the unknown, the revenue unknowns with the fall season. So we put a pause on almost every capital project. And we are doing a football stadium project, so that one needed to stay on the timeline because of the revenue impacts that has down the road. And another one we did keep going just because it was 100% funded, donor funded. But all the other capital projects we did have to put on hold, and that's just the reality of it right now. We just have to look at this differently and decide what is essential. As Jason was talking, I was thinking about essentially the wants are gone, right? For this next fiscal year, the wants are not even on the table. It's just us deciding what are those needs. And that's back to the whole coach, facility manager, conversation. Like, those are hard conversations to have, but we do need to decide what are those needs from a department standpoint, from a student athlete standpoint, from a recruit standpoint. And yeah, they're going to be hard conversations, but I've actually been looking forward to using COVID-19 as an excuse, right? Like, it's an easy no now, right? It's like, hey, sorry, coach, COVID-19. What do you do? COVID-19. So
How will that work?
It's going to be an easy year, man. Honestly, it wasn't easy telling a few of the sports that we were, pausing their capital project, right? Like, they were fundraising for years, and then for us to put a pause on that, those were really hard conversations to have. But the small stuff, I think people understand, and it's been good to not good, but it's been rewarding to go through this process with the coaches, and they're all on board, right? They want everyone to be successful, and I think it sort of has brought us back to ground zero, and we're in this together, and we're a team, and you mentioned it, Derek, like it's a ship, right? Or it takes a village, and it really does. Yeah. So we're going to need that collaboration and participation by all coaches and all of our department colleagues.
Excellent. Thanks, Gavin. I think this one's important, came from the audience. We've talked a lot towards general building operations, but from a facility standpoint, more so than an event standpoint, when we look at our stadiums or arenas or pools or whatever it might be, what are some changes we've looked at there from leading into an event standpoint? Anyone want to take a stab at that? Bob?
Yeah, from an event standpoint, I mean, to be completely honest with you, the event standpoint is kind of the next phase in our progression in planning. But,
yeah.
we have talked about some of the things we've discussed already, right? That next level of sanitation that's going to be expected. There's been a lot of discussion nationally and even within the ACC about the implementation of technology. And how we can use technology to help us. And to Gavin and Jason's point a few minutes ago, that's kind of a want in our world and probably in many other worlds. So short term, how do we redirect and again pivot and look at how we can accomplish some of those things without the resource spend or without the use of technology. For us right now, I mean, we're focused, and I think most people have heard that we're focused from the perspective of thinking about how do we operate with essential staff and broadcast personnel only, and then finding that way to ramp up as soon as the university or the state, et cetera, allows us to. So our focus from a facility perspective is really on how do we operate for those key entities, those staff members, protect them, the broadcast operations, et cetera, and how do we put our facilities in a best position, whether that be from an HVAC standpoint, with air circulation, et cetera, to be ready to go to support those people on those game days and events.
I agree, Gavin.
I would also say, a lot of the principles and guidelines that we're using right now to see how we can bring people back to our facilities, right? The reopening of our facilities for practice or voluntary practice, like those same principles are going to direct us when it comes to events, right? So Jason talked about committee. We here at Utah, we have a very large committee, and there's lots of people in it, and we have events. So that's one subcommittee of this committee that we're taking the guidelines from the CDC and and the government and the state of Utah and the university. And we're taking all that and seeing how can we apply this to our facilities, right? So Pac-12 has allowed us to open our facilities June 15th. So we're making those plans to see if we can do that on that date or soon after. But, to answer your question, it's all that same stuff, right? So, whether that's directional signage and measures to help people keep their space, face coverings, all that same stuff can be applied to the events. It's just, that's the harder one, right, though. As we look into the fall and how we do this on a large scale, I think it's easy to deal with 5 basketball players right now, or a workout group of 10 football players. That's actually easy, difficult, but easy. But when we're talking about, 20, 30, 40,000 people, what do you do?
Yeah, well, if I could add one thing with that too, and Gavin kind of cued my memory, one of the things we're considering is the use of other staff, right? So we're going to probably have to ramp up our sanitation. We all expect that. We may have to do different things in terms of how we set up an approach, or the timeliness of that, to make sure spaces are ready. And how do we access a resource such as our employee base, which is now maybe have minimal less focused operations because maybe fans aren't present, or a limited number of fans are present, and how can we redirect them to accomplish some of these things, these principles or guiding principles that are going to be in place for game days.
That's great, Bob. And I think a couple of things spurned in my mind. First, I wish we could talk about space allocation for a bit. But when you think about events and space allocation within facilities, I think of things like locker rooms too. Do we have enough space if we have to spread out in our locker rooms, or officials' locker rooms, or media spaces? Certainly all things we need to consider. In the spirit of space allocation, a lot of people are really in tune to the collaboration piece. And Jason, this one's going to be for you. It's an audience question, and it'll probably be our wrap-up question. But from a collaboration standpoint, has there been any work with campus and identifying spaces that might be in the athletics area that could be multi-purpose use for campus? Is there searching for larger spaces to hold classes, or different things of that sort?
Great question. I haven't heard that from utilizing athletic spaces, although it would be on the table. We share facilities frequently. I'm not going to provide a great answer here, but backwards, I guess, we're relatively limited in locker room space and shower space, right? So in providing those facilities for, say, a visiting team that will come on in the fall, we're looking at areas in the university center or other places on campus that we may be able to make a little more dynamic in order to provide services and actually be able to host some games. But backwards, we haven't really had a whole lot of interaction with campus utilizing classroom facilities. They've spent a bulk of their time kind of talking about how to utilize the spaces they do have and addressing them appropriately. I don't think they're at the point where they're discussing, okay, we don't have enough classroom space at this moment.
Oh, I appreciate you addressing that, Jason. Well, as we approach the end of our time, I'd certainly like to give our panelists a last 30-second elevator pitch, so to say, to drop any last-minute pearls of wisdom on us that they'd like to. So, Gavin, would you like to start?
Man, I get to go first every time, huh?
No, you're lucky. You win the lottery.
This has been a fun panel, and you touched on this a little bit, Derek, but the collaboration amongst us all is really the most important piece, right? Like, yes, it's important to have collaboration with your department, with your own athletic department people, but we understand this better than they do. And, the collaboration that I've just seen amongst facility managers in the last few months has been awesome, right? Like, people sending me their stuff and I'm sending them, their minds. That has been really, really helpful. And it's been a huge takeaway, right? Like, we've got the best job in the world, and we're so lucky to do what we do. It's times like these that we're tasked, and it's hard, and a lot of late nights, early mornings. But, at the end of the day, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through it together. And, whether we're playing games this fall or spring or next year, like, we need facilities, and the facilities are staying here. And so it's a great job that we all have. And I just would again, work with your colleagues, and CEFMA is a great platform that provides us this opportunity to get together and talk and share. So appreciate it.
Agreed. Thanks, Gavin. Bob?
Yeah, I'm going to expand on that a little bit. And Gavin, those are incredibly great thoughts. I mean, we talk so much about investing in people, and right now, I think everybody throughout our athletic departments, for the most part, are in alignment. Everybody gets what's going on. I think probably unparalleled in likely a lot of our times in our respective institutions or within college athletics. And there's an acceptance that things are going to be different and things are going to be more efficient and things are going to be lean. And so I think now more than ever, it's the time to focus on our people and our users, how they operate, how they function, and supporting them the best way possible, and focus again, as I've mentioned before, on the priorities. We're all here for the student athletes. We're all here to support our coaches, and thinking about how we approach things moving forward with that focus on them and them as people, and whether that's from communication, whether that's from sanitation, whether that's from maintenance, upkeep, etc. The little things that we can do in this process are going to be important. And on one of the bi-weekly panels we had, I think Derek, you've been on it, and Gavin, you as well, possibly. I heard a comment a couple weeks ago about finding a way to say yes, and it's stuck with me since that point. And I have preached it to our staff, and the concept of how do we engage, how do we say yes to our student athletes, how do we say yes to our coaches, how do we say yes to our fans, and I think if we start to apply those things, this can be a huge moment in terms of relationship building that leads us beyond the current moment that we live in and into the future, and allows some of those relationships with coaches or student athletes or others to really grow and be successful, and allow us to kind of build moving forward. And I appreciate the time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Bob. Jason?
Yeah, just what has helped me kind of guide through this time of uncertainty and decisions that have to be made and these difficult conversations about possibly cutting budgets or projects is just being really sound in your philosophy. Our philosophy here is we want to return to play in the fall and compete at the highest possible level while ensuring a safe and welcoming environment for the student athletes and patrons. And you got to stick with that. You got to be consistent when rules and regulations permit. And just conveying expectations to your staff, coaches, and people in your spaces is going to go a long way in helping us get through this.
Outstanding. Thanks, Jason. Well, if I may, just to wrap up, and first of all, for those of you who have signed up for the roundtable discussion featuring facilities-based discussion topics this afternoon, those will begin promptly at 1:15. For those of you not signed up for the roundtable discussion, we would invite you and encourage you to tune in tomorrow as Kevin DeShazo returns to CEFMA, this time for his session on leading through the storm. I learned a lot today, and I'm really appreciative of these panelists to join me. So appreciative of the audience and the dozens of questions that have flowed in. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all, but what great insights. What I took away from those last pearls of wisdom. First of all, we're in it together. We're all each other's resources, and if any of us can help any of you at any time, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here for our student athletes, our coaches, our staffs, our campus communities. We're doing this for a village, and it takes a village, and we're in this together. The little things matter. Every minute detail matters. As we reopen our facilities to training and our events to spectators, the microscope will be on. We work in athletics, we're in a fishbowl. I promise you the microscope will be on us. So pay attention to the details and find a way to yes. We're all in a hard time, right? Whether it be with our external teams financially or our coaches who are just fighting and clawing to win. Let's work hard to figure out how we can say yes and support our coaches and our families within our departments. And then Jason, I loved what you ended on, and be sound in your philosophy, right? I think it's important to have guiding principles and to use those each day to guide us to victory as we work to and through COVID-19. That's all I have. To our panelists, Jason, Gavin, Bob, tremendous professionals. Thank you so much for imparting your wisdom. And thank you, CEFMA, for tuning in. Take care.